There are places that should be safe by default. A sunny beach, a stretch of sand, the rhythm of waves against the shore. But for black women in America, even the most peaceful places can turn hostile in an instant. This is the story of Zara Miller and how a quiet swim became a national scandal. Not because of what she did, but because of what she looked like. Zara hadn't taken a vacation in 3 years. Not a real one. Not one where the only thing she had to think about was the warmth of the sun or the sound of the waves. No, her vacations had been working vacations, the kind where the laptop stays glued to her side and Slack notifications buzz like an incessant reminder that her worth was tied to her work ethic. Work had become her identity, not by choice, but by survival. When you're the only black woman in a marketing firm that thrives on performative allyship, success doesn't come easy. It means mastering the art of smiling through the condescension. It means nodding politely when they praise you for being articulate, as if the very sound of your voice is an anomaly. It means leading every Black History Month initiative, giving them a piece of your soul, only to be passed over when it comes time for promotions. Because they don't see you as leadership material, just a diversity token. So when her therapist finally said it, she'd been waiting to hear those words. Zara, you're burning out. You need to go somewhere with no Wi-Fi. She took it seriously, maybe for the first time in a long time. She booked a solo trip to Florida, Key Biscayne. Nothing fancy, no luxury resorts or overpriced cocktails. Just sun, silence, and a body of water vast enough to remind her she was more than her inbox, more than the expectations that others placed on her. The Airbnb was small but charming, a simple bungalow, a few blocks from the beach. No smart TV with endless streaming options, no espresso machine that taunted her with the promise of productivity, just a hammock in the backyard, the kind that invited stillness, and a welcome note from the host that simply read, "Peace is here." No fanfare, just an invitation to be. She arrived on Friday afternoon. Dragging the weight of the week behind her, she collapsed onto the bed and slept for 12 hours straight. Woke up to the sounds of birds calling to each other, to the breeze shifting through the palm trees. It was a symphony of calm she hadn't realized she craved so desperately. And then Saturday arrived. She looked out the window at the blue sky and felt the urge to do something she hadn't done in far too long. She was going to the beach. No emails to check, no deadlines to meet. Just the sun, the sand, and the ocean stretching out into infinity. She pulled out her favorite swimsuit from the suitcase, a burnt orange one-piece, high-waisted, bold. It hugged her body unapologetically, making a statement without needing any words. She looked in the mirror, not for approval, but as a reminder to herself, this body is mine. The curves, the edges, the history woven into every inch. And this rest, this moment, was hers too. Sunscreen, headphones, towel, water bottle, a paperback for the moments between waves. She slipped her GoPro into the waterproof strap across her shoulder, not for safety, but for fun, to capture the moments when the water embraced her, when she could finally let go of the weight of the world. By 9:17 a.m., Zara was walking across the soft, warm sand, the Atlantic stretching ahead of her like a promise of freedom. What she didn't know yet, as the sound of the waves filled her ears and the salty air lifted her spirits, was that peace would last for exactly 47 minutes, and then everything would fracture. She didn't notice the eyes at first, the way they followed her as she walked toward the water, or the whispers that seemed to hang in the air behind her. It wasn't the first time she'd felt this. The heat of stares, the weight of judgment, even when no one said a word. But this time it was different. There was something in the air that made her skin prickle, something beneath the surface that felt off. She tried to push it aside. The beach was supposed to be her sanctuary, a place where the world couldn't reach her. But as she waded into the surf, the moment of peace was shattered by a sharp voice. "Hey, you can't just sit here." Zara turned, her pulse quickening. A man in his late 40s stood on the sand, arms crossed, a frown etched into his face. He looked her up and down with a mix of confusion and suspicion. "This is a private spot," he said, his tone dripping with entitlement. "I don't think they allow, well, people like you here." Zara's heart skipped a beat. She'd heard it before, of course. The microaggressions, the subtle racism, the quiet yet unmistakable way people made her feel less than, like she didn't belong. But it was never this direct, never this bold. For a moment she felt paralyzed. But then, as the waves lapped at her feet, something inside her shifted. This was her moment, her space, her rest. "Actually," she said, voice steady but full of an unspoken fire, "I think this is exactly where I'm meant to be." But the man didn't relent. Instead, his voice grew louder, calling for someone else on the beach. "Hey, security! We've got a situation here." Zara took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as she turned her attention back to the water. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be lost in the moment, floating in peace, not dealing with this. But the reality of her world had a way of following her, no matter how far she tried to run. In the distance, she saw the lifeguard tower, the man's shouts summoning another presence. But Zara wasn't sure if the lifeguard was coming to her aid or if he was just another figure in a system that would soon remind her that not everyone saw her as she saw herself. The next few minutes would change everything. The beach was calm, the kind of serenity that made you forget about the rush of the world, the chaos that clung to every corner of life. Kids built sandcastles near the dunes, their laughter light and carefree. A volleyball net stretched between two poles, waiting for players who, for now, were lost in the slow rhythm of a Saturday morning. The faint hum of a reggae tune bled from a nearby Bluetooth speaker, the kind of sound that felt like summer itself, a soundtrack to the warmth of the day. Zara took a deep breath, trying to stay calm as she turned her attention back to the water. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be lost in the moment, floating in peace, not dealing with this. But the reality of her world had a way of following her, no matter how far she tried to run. In the distance, she saw the lifeguard tower, the man's shout summoning another presence. But Zara wasn't sure if the lifeguard was coming to her aid or if he was just another figure in a system that would soon remind her that not everyone saw her as she saw herself. Her own. The world around her faded into a soft background hum. The heat, the sound of waves, the occasional laugh of a child, all of it was just noise. After about half an hour, the water called to her. Zara stood, brushing the sand off her legs, and walked toward the shoreline. The sand shifted beneath her feet, warm, then cool, then warm again as the ocean's edge kissed her ankles. The foam licked at her skin as the tide rolled in, a delicate greeting from the sea. And then she dove. The world above her vanished as soon as she submerged. The noise, the voices, the weight of it all, it disappeared. Only the rush of bubbles and the weightlessness of salt water remained, wrapping around her like a blanket of calm. Zara swam out farther than the crowds, farther than the reach of the noise, the world that seemed so eager to claim her. She let her body cut through the water, slicing through the space where she was free. She floated on her back then, the rhythm of her breath slow and steady, eyes turned to the sky. The sun blazed overhead, but under the water there was only coolness and the pulse of the ocean. It felt like a piece of herself she'd been missing, not just the freedom, but the ability to exist without the weight of judgment, without the constant need to prove that she belonged. A splash near her side caught her attention. Zara's eyes flickered open, and she noticed a little boy, maybe 5 or 6, joyfully splashing nearby. His golden hair caught the sunlight as he giggled, chasing after a foam football that had drifted away from the others. Zara watched for a moment, amused by his energy, and then the ball floated in her direction. It was light, just a soft piece of foam, but it felt like an invitation. Zara reached out with her fingertips and nudged it gently back toward him. No words, no contact, just water and momentum, the way life moved when it wasn't interrupted by the noise. But someone else had been watching. They weren't watching the ball. They were watching Zara, watching the body that had touched it. It was a strange thing the way people saw her, the way the smallest, most innocent actions were scrutinized when she was involved, the way her very presence seemed to draw a line in the sand. As the boy chased after the ball, laughing and oblivious, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been staring too long, too intensely. She glanced over her shoulder and saw a man a few feet away, sitting on a beach chair, his eyes locked on her. His gaze wasn't just curious, it was calculating, invasive. Zara couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so exposed, so scrutinized for simply existing. The man didn't look away. His eyes lingered, even as the boy grabbed the ball and ran back toward his parents, his carefree laughter filling the air. Zara tried to shake off the discomfort, tried to focus on the rhythm of the waves, but it was impossible. The man's gaze burned into her, heavy and unrelenting. It was the kind of look that made her feel as though she was the subject of a test, a puzzle to be figured out. A feeling of dread crept over her, seeping into her calm like an unexpected current pulling her under. The space she had carved out for herself, the peace she had fought so hard to find, was slipping away. She glanced around, trying to make sense of the situation, but the more she tried to ignore him, the more his presence loomed. And then, in that instant, Zara understood. It wasn't just her body that made him uncomfortable. It was the fact that she belonged here, that despite everything, she had the audacity to claim this space, to exist freely, to be a black woman on a beach, alone, unapologetically herself. She swam back toward the shore, the weight of his stare pressing against her like the tide. She told herself it was nothing, that it was just another moment of discomfort that would pass. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this time, it was different. This time, the beach wasn't just a place of rest. It had become a battleground. And Zara knew deep down that the real fight was about to begin. Hey! Hey! Get away from him! Zara's heart jumped in her chest. She looked up, confusion flooding her senses. The little boy was still laughing, completely oblivious to the scene unfolding. His giggles echoed through the air, a stark contrast to the sudden tension that gripped the beach. Two white women, their faces hidden behind large, oversized sunglasses, were marching toward her, fingers outstretched and pointing accusatorily. I saw her. She was pulling him toward her, one of them shouted, voice trembling with righteous fury. Zara blinked, stunned, the words not quite registering at first. What? No, I was just... Don't talk to him, the other woman snapped, her voice rising in panic. Zara felt her pulse quicken, the heat of the sun turning to a cold sweat. What was happening? She had only nudged the ball back to the boy. Nothing more. She was just in the water, enjoying the fleeting moments of peace. Undefined. The first woman raised her phone, already dialing. I'm calling the police. The boy, still clutching his foam football, paused mid-laugh, his eyes flicking between Zara and the women, confusion and uncertainty creeping into his features. Zara's stomach dropped. The beach, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. What the hell was going on? She backed away slowly, hands rising above the waterline, trembling. She didn't want to escalate this. She didn't want to give them a reason to make things worse. He's not with me. I was just swimming. She lured him, one of the women shouted, the accusation hanging in the air like a poison. Someone stop her, the other woman yelled, her voice cutting through the silence that had slowly gathered. Zara's heart hammered in her chest as people started to turn their attention toward her. Whispers spread like wildfire. Phones clicked on. The sound of a camera being aimed at her felt like a spotlight suddenly trained on her every move. Is she taking him? Someone murmured. A man, his phone pointed directly at her, began filming, his expression impassive as the drama unfolded. Zara felt a wave of nausea roll over her. She stepped carefully toward the shore, her body still slick with salt water, her legs trembling. The sand beneath her feet felt like it was swallowing her up. Her towel, her lifeline, was still 30 feet away, but she didn't dare move toward it. Every second stretched until it felt like an eternity. She was drowning in the eyes on her, the judgment, the suspicion. She could hear the sirens before she saw them, the wail of an approaching police car, the red and blue lights flashing in the distance, kicking up sand as it screeched to a halt. Zara's throat went dry. She stood frozen, feeling the weight of the moment bear down on her. The officers approached fast, two of them, hands already resting on their belts. their faces hard and unreadable. "Step away from the child, ma'am," one of them commanded, his voice cold, like a prelude to something even colder. Zara's chest tightened. She opened her mouth to explain, to tell them she was innocent, but the words seemed to stick. Her mind was racing, but the words wouldn't come. She had to make them understand. "He's not with me," she said, voice strained. "We've got reports of an attempted abduction," one of the officers said flatly, as if this were just another routine call. No surprise, no empathy, just business. Zara felt the world tilt. Attempted abduction. Her throat closed as the air thickened with dread. Panic flooded her veins. She gestured weakly toward her towel, her stomach churning with the knowledge that this moment was slipping out of her control, that her words wouldn't matter. "My ID, it's right there. I have—" She started, but the officer's gaze hardened, and his voice sliced through her attempt to explain. "Do not reach for anything," he barked, his hand hovering near his sidearm. A chill crawled up her spine. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, their judgment heavy in the air, the heat of their stares burning her skin. And then, just like that, the situation became real. With the entire beach watching, a hush falling over the crowd, they cuffed her. The cold metal of the handcuffs pressed into her wrists, the pressure sharp and unforgiving. The world around her went quiet, but her mind was screaming, "This isn't happening. This can't be happening." She tried to move, to break free of the suffocating weight of the moment, but it didn't matter. There was no escape. No one to hear her, no one to see her side of the story. They dragged her through the sand, away from the waves, away from the peace that had been hers for the briefest of moments. The sound of her own breath, shallow and fast, mingled with the murmurs of the crowd as the officers led her toward the waiting squad car. She caught a glimpse of the boy, his wide eyes searching the scene, his small face full of confusion. And then, all at once, it hit her. She wasn't just being detained, she wasn't just being questioned, she was being othered. In this moment, she was the suspect. In their eyes, she was the danger, the black woman, the one who didn't belong. Zara could feel the weight of the world bearing down on her as they shoved her into the back of the police car, the door slamming shut with a finality that echoed in her chest. And she realized with a sickening certainty that the battle for her freedom had only just begun. Her knees hit the sand first. The coarse grain scraped against her skin, a sharp reminder of how fast the ground could rise to meet you when you least expected it. Then, her dignity followed, crumbling under the weight of the handcuffs clicking shut like a door slamming in her face. The cold steel bit into her warm skin, a harsh contrast that made the world feel all the more surreal. The crowd had grown. It felt like the whole beach was watching now. The murmurs, the whispers, the flashes of phone cameras snapping away. Some were capturing the moment like it was entertainment, like a piece of theater unfolding before them. Others were speaking in low tones, but Zara could hear snippets of their judgment. Is this really happening? What's going on? She did what? Some faces were filled with curiosity, others with skepticism, and some, Zara could feel, carried that familiar sting of indifference, the kind of indifference that came with knowing that, no matter what happened, she would always be the one who had to explain herself. Zara didn't cry, she didn't scream, she wasn't going to give them that. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She'd been trained for this moment her whole life, not literally, but spiritually. It wasn't just something she'd read about or heard about in stories. It was in her bones. She had learned how to survive being the suspect while black. She'd learned how to keep her composure when the world told her she didn't belong, when the weight of suspicion fell on her shoulders like a mantle she never asked for. "You're making a mistake," she said softly, her voice steady, despite the rising panic clawing at her chest. One of the officers, his face hidden behind mirrored sunglasses, barely spared her a glance. His voice was flat, detached. "If that's true, you'll be fine." Zara's chest tightened. But I'm not fine, she thought, her mind racing. She could feel the eyes of the crowd on her, their stares slicing through her. The moment had spiraled out of control so quickly, and she couldn't make sense of any of it. It didn't matter that she hadn't done anything wrong. None of that mattered now. They didn't see her, not really. They only saw the danger, the suspicion, the assumption that she was guilty of something. They didn't ask for her name. They didn't ask the boy what happened. They didn't even glance at the GoPro still strapped to her shoulder, a silent witness to the truth of what had occurred, the truth of what had been nothing, no threat, no harm, no malice. But the truth wasn't what mattered here. They led her through the crowd, barefoot and dripping, like she was a criminal. The sand clung to her skin, the water still beating off her. But she was nothing more than a spectacle now, a target for everyone's gaze. She could hear people murmuring, could feel the weight of their eyes on her back as she was paraded through the crowd. Some faces looked on in disbelief, others in pity, but none of them stepped in to help. None of them stepped in to question. One of the women, the one who'd yelled first, muttered to a bystander, her voice dripping with disdain, "Thank God we were watching. Who knows what she would have done?" The words cut through Zara like a blade. She didn't look at the woman, didn't respond, but she could feel the venom in her voice. It was the kind of statement that made it clear Zara wasn't just being accused. She was already guilty in their eyes. The crowd was complicit, and the scene was a performance. Her body was the stage. The woman's words were the script. Everyone was just playing their part. His throat burned, but she swallowed it down. There was no room for that now, no room for weakness. She had to survive this. She had to make it through this moment with her mind intact, even if her body was being forced into submission. She wouldn't let them take away what little dignity she had left, even as they marched her toward the squad car. She could hear the rustling of clothes, the soft shuffle of feet behind her as the officers guided her forward. The sirens were distant now, but their presence loomed like a storm on the horizon. Each step felt like it was pulling her deeper into the darkness of a world where justice was never meant to be hers. And still, she didn't cry. She wouldn't. Because Zara knew that the moment she allowed herself to break, the moment she let them see the cracks in her armor, they would use it against her. She had been taught how to navigate a world that would never see her as human, how to exist as both witness and suspect, how to carry the weight of their doubts like chains that she could never escape. As they pushed her into the back of the police car, the door slamming shut behind her with a finality that felt like a death sentence, Zara closed her eyes for just a second. "I'm not done," she thought, the words a quiet promise to herself. This is just the beginning. She wasn't going to let them define her. She wasn't going to let them erase her truth. Not today. Not ever. By the time Zara was locked in a holding cell, her name wasn't just being whispered, it was trending. Someone had posted a shaky, half-blurry video from the beach. The footage jerked with movement as it captured Zara, cuffed and flanked by two officers, being escorted past the lifeguard tower. In the background, the boy stood, holding his foam football, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. There was no sound, just captions flashing across the screen like a verdict. She tried to take him. Kidnapping attempt at Key Biscayne. BLM activist caught. And then came the comments. Why do they always say they were just swimming? Notice how she played the victim card. Check her immigration status. Looks like a setup to me. Good thing those moms were there. The vitriol rolled in like a tidal wave, each comment more venomous than the last. Zara's stomach churned as the familiar feeling of being trapped in a world that refused to see her truth sank deeper. When Zara's phone, once returned after hours of silence, buzzed back to life, it was flooded with 212 unread messages. Some were from friends, worried and trying to make sense of what had happened. Others were from co-workers, offering their support, some with confusion, others with a hint of skepticism. Her sister had texted multiple times, her messages growing more frantic with each passing hour. Her boss had sent a single message, terse and businesslike. "What's going on? Do you need help?" But it was the messages from strangers that made her skin crawl. One read, "Watch your back, baby snatcher." The words stung like acid, sharp and cutting. She stared at the screen, feeling the bile rise in her throat. The weight of it all felt crushing. Every notification felt like another layer of weight piling on top of her. Her life, her identity, now reduced to a hashtag, a headline, a mob waiting to pass judgment. She hadn't even been read her rights, hadn't been given the courtesy of due process. They had moved swiftly, with little care, because in this world, she was the problem, the villain. She scrolled down further, trying to find something, anything, that could explain this madness. But there was nothing. No explanation. Just the black and white image of her, captured in that moment on the beach, her reality distorted by the lenses of those who would never understand. And all the while, in the quiet of the holding cell, Zara could hear the echo of the questions she'd been asking herself since it all began. How had they made her the suspect? How had they decided her fate before she even had a chance to speak? Zara sat in the cell for 4 hours. No food, no water, no questions, just waiting. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, the dim fluorescent lights overhead casting long shadows that stretched across the concrete floor. Time seemed to warp and stretch, each minute dragging on forever, until the weight of her own thoughts became unbearable. She asked to speak to a lawyer. She was ignored. She asked again. Silence. The absence of any kind of response was a deafening reminder that in that moment, her voice didn't matter. She could have screamed, begged, demanded her rights, but it wouldn't have changed anything. She was just another body in a holding cell, waiting for an outcome that felt out of her control. And then, finally, a supervisor entered. "You're being released." The child confirmed you didn't touch him. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had just transpired, no acknowledgement of the damage that had been done, just the barest of formalities, a signature line, a mumbled, "Have a nice day." And that was it. Zara stood there, her body stiff from the hours of immobility, her heart still pounding in her chest. She signed the release form automatically, almost on autopilot, her mind still trying to process everything that had happened. Was this it? The end? She had survived, but had she really won? But Zara had something they didn't expect, her GoPro. The camera strapped to her shoulder when she swam had captured the entire incident, from the swim to the gentle nudge of the ball to the screaming that shattered her moment of peace. It had recorded everything in crisp 1080p, a silent, unwavering witness to the truth. That night, after the adrenaline had worn off and she had a moment to breathe, Zara sat down and uploaded the footage to her personal blog. There was no narration, no edits, just the raw, unfiltered truth. The little boy floating toward her, his laughter carefree. Her gentle nudge of the ball, a small act of kindness in an innocent moment. The women screaming from the shore, their voices cutting through the calm, her hands raised, her voice steady, trying to explain. And underneath it all, her fear, real, palpable, but kept in check. She was afraid, but she held on to her composure. The internet flipped. The video spread like wildfire, circulating across social media. Celebrities retweeted it. Lawyers offered to help pro bono. News networks, hungry for a story, requested interviews. The clip was everywhere. And suddenly, Zara wasn't the suspect anymore. She was the mirror. The video was a reflection of the world that had decided to turn on her, and now it was their turn to see themselves for what they were. The women on the beach, the officers, the bystanders with their phones, they were all laid bare in the footage. The truth had been captured, not in words, but in action. And now Zara's story was no longer just her own. It was everyone's. Her blog was flooded with messages of support. Strangers, outraged by what they'd seen, offered solidarity. They shared their own stories, their own experiences of being falsely accused, of being othered in a world that had already made up its mind. Zara felt the tide shift, felt herself being lifted by the collective voice of those who understood what she had endured. But as the world shifted its gaze, Zara knew that this wasn't over. This wasn't a victory. This was just the beginning. The battle for her own narrative had only just begun, and while the crowd had turned from suspect to hero, the deeper fight for justice, for accountability, was far from done. But now at least, the world was listening. It wasn't the first time this happened. Emails started pouring in. Black women and men from across the country shared their stories. A father mistaken for a stranger when picking up his daughter from school. A nanny accused of theft because she was too affectionate with the kids. A teenage swimmer asked to leave a country club because someone felt unsafe. Zara saw the pattern. Tea wasn't just about her. It never was. She launched Free Swim Without Fear, a civil rights campaign for Black beachgoers, swimmers, and public space users. They built a digital guide: what to do when you're accused while Black, how to safely record, who to call, where to turn. Donations flooded in. She hired a legal team. She partnered with city councils. She trained lifeguards on bias de-escalation. She became, unwillingly but undeniably, an advocate. 1 month later, Zara returned to Key Biscayne. Same beach, same towel, same orange swimsuit. But this time, she wasn't alone. She brought her sister, friends, members of her new organization, survivors who had emailed her, lifeguards, mothers, teens, reporters. They stood in a long line at the edge of the surf, and then, one by one, they walked in. Zara stood waist-deep in the ocean, closed her eyes, and for the first time since that day, she let the water hold her again. No yelling, no cameras, no fear, just breath and power. She never got a real apology. The women who accused her never came forward. The police department released a generic statement, but she didn't wait for their justice. She built her own. Zara now speaks at schools and city halls. She teaches Black kids how to swim, how to speak, and how to document everything. She walks into rooms that once dismissed her and commands them with silence, then fire. And she always ends with the same line: I didn't come here to fight. I came here to float. But if I have to swim upstream to make space for the rest of us, so be it, because the tide is changing, and we don't drown, we rise. Undefined. If you want to hear more stories that challenge the narrative, spark conversation, and uncover the truth behind the headlines, don't forget to subscribe. This journey is far from over, and your voice matters in every step we take together. Hit that subscribe button and join the conversation. Let's continue to stand up, speak out, and break the silence.